Welcome everybody to another episode of Views from the Bridge. We are previewing St. Louis tonight, and I got a couple friends with me. Evan, how are
Hi,
you?
Justin. I'm good. I was gonna make some kind of like long wax poetical soliloquy about how like the three of us should really be talking about like Wallfall or Brandon Miller or I don't know, Corey Bard, but like before he got to MLS. There's a lot of names the three of us could throw around that would mean absolutely nothing to anyone. Instead, I'll just
Yeah.
talk about how bridges are something that you can fly over.
Oh, there it is. Well
Hey,
done.
there it
There
is.
you go. There's the
There it
crossover.
is.
There's the crossover line. So mentioning the crossover line, we also have longtime friend
Good
of
lord.
Views from the Bridge and Evan and
I
I,
don't want to talk about it, man.
Phill Grooms from Flyover Footy is here.
Yo, how's it going, everyone? It's good to see, Justin, it's good to see that you are aging with me here. I see plenty of gray in your beard as well. Uh, but your eyes are as gorgeous as ever,
Wow.
sir. So well done.
Oh, thanks.
This is just gonna be a podcast where it very much sounds like three people just kind of getting drinks in a bar, and it's because we could just
Yeah,
do that instead. But no, we have
so true.
platforms, so we're gonna use them.
Man, my wife told me to tell you hi, but because you were obviously she was on the USL show with you guys
Yes.
multiple
Yeah,
times, but
Lord, what? Oh
it
my god.
it
Much
but after
love.
that comment, I'm not sure she's gonna want me to tell you hi
Well,
anymore.
you
So
know,
Well, hopefully I made her a little jealous.
wow.
Give her a little
there you
fuel
go.
for later. There you go.
Stoking the
There you
St.
go.
Louis Pittsburgh rivalry as always. So why are we
Always good to
here,
go.
Justin?
Well, okay.
What's happening?
Well, I think this coming weekend, not at the time of recording because
Well,
we're
sure.
recording this early, but this coming weekend when this show comes out, the Philadelphia Union plays St. Louis, and it's going to be an interesting matchup. And so we figured who else better to talk about Bradley Carnell and Vasilev and the high press and everything else that is coming with this Philadelphia Union team than the person who watched Bradley Carnell for his first year in MLS and all that kind of stuff. So, Phil, I don't know where you want to start with that, but I think we might be wondering. It feels very similar to what happened with St. Louis. The Union are obviously starting out hot. Nobody knew what to expect with the Union this year. Everybody predicted them not to make the playoffs, and now somehow at the time of recording, Philadelphia and Vancouver are leading the Supporters Shield race. So tell us why it feels familiar, I guess, because you obviously watched Carnell's seasons in St. Louis.
Yeah, I think I can't remember what you said when, let's see how fast I can pull this up, but you were like, oh my gosh, you love the results. It seems to be consistent with what happened in STL. And he I hope he adjusts differently as people figure out how to play us. And I was like, boy, that sounds so familiar. And what's strange about it, this might be too deep, too fast, but I would say no one started adjusting to Carnell's style of play until very late in the season. And I kept saying the same thing. I was like, when are people going to just start bunkering up against us? And it didn't happen till the very end of the regular season. Then, of course, the playoffs was just like the ugliest football you could ever watch against Sporting Kansas City and St. Louis. So maybe, hopefully, the answer is the same for you guys, because clearly this is working for you guys, perhaps better than even it worked for St. Louis.
Well, it was funny
As
because
you've watched the Union in the first couple of games of the season, I don't know how much you watch, highlights, whatever. Similarities, differences in kind of the builds of the teams. The style of play seems very familiar, but any differences you're seeing in kind of the builds of the teams?
No, I watched a decent amount of one game, and it looked spot on. You guys, I think you were playing in a 4-2-3-1. I think it was the first game I watched, and you know, the good looks were amazing. The direct to goal was perfect. I think your strikers are leading the way on and off the ball. I think toward the end of the game, I saw the big lead, and I think they got a couple goals back or something. But either way, I started noticing that frantic running back, chasing the ball because they finally bypassed the press, and just like, just everyone scattering everywhere, doing what they can to stop the ball from going in the net. And we had Berkey. You guys will be just fine because you probably have the next best goalkeeper. You might argue that he's the best, but still, like, you guys will be fine. I think it'll keep working. But these are things that are like very familiar to me, and so yeah, I don't know. It looked really similar, if not the same. So I was actually excited to hear what you guys thought about Carnell, especially compared to the previous regime. Like,
Yeah.
are there big differences? Because you were somewhat a pressing team with that adjustment to try to possess the ball later on. But I don't know. What do you guys feel like the timeline was?
Well, it's funny because as like a fan of like obviously as a person that listens to Flyover Footy for personal and then just like professional reasons, air quotes around professional.
Very kind.
Anytime. It was funny because last year, and even like I think kind of in the preseason build up this year, it was like we weren't actually that bad if you break down the numbers, which is what Matt's so good at with on your end out there. Where it's like we're actually fine, no one can finish. Whereas for the Union last year, it was like, okay, well, we can kind of score, but we have no defense, and our identity is this weird, like, Red Bull by way of a guy that doesn't necessarily want to use that system. And now it's like, this is the year, and I think Justin might have even said it on our podcast, where it's like, Ernst Tanner got what he wanted. He has everything in place. Now it's just it's going to work or you're going to be fired. And so far, Ernst Tanner is kind of like, bet on himself and like the Red Bull system where Carnell, kind of came up, is paid off. And it's sort of nice to see the Union, who have been trying to kind of emulate that system for like on and off 7 years, like actually playing it and having it like work, at least in April.
Right. Do you guys feel like Ernst built this team to be this style of coach, and this is kind of a match made in heaven in a way?
Somewhat, yeah. I mean, I there's a lot of thoughts I have about Curtin and kind of Curtin's end of the end of his time in Philly, and I think there's a level of the Union hung on to guys for too long. Jack Elliott being one of those guys, like they kind of hung on to what they had and what they knew, and what got them success. I mean, they were, what do we talk about, 30 seconds away from winning MLS Cup, until Gareth Bale ruined everything. But it's like, I think I look at it and I go, hey, we were close and we had it, but there was no adjustments from that point. And then it was like 2 years later, these guys are all 2 years older and not able to play the same way that they had played. And so I do feel like there was a necessary turn of the roster. And then you've got to figure out like, hey, who do we have and what style are they playing and all of that kind of stuff. And so I feel like the conversation probably towards the end of last year was, hey, Jim, if you're going to come back, then we need, if you're going to come back, then we need to figure out what we're doing with some of these players and all that kind of stuff. And then there was probably an element of like, hey, but this is kind of the identity we want. So we need to pull in a coach that's going to play that style of identity. And then we need to fit the players in. And obviously Carnell has brought in Vasilev and some other guys that he knows and has played with previously. And then I think guys like Jean-Jacques and Lukic that they brought in this year are obviously made for the system that they're playing. And so I feel like it's a little bit of both. Like there's an element of these are the guys we have. They would be good at playing this style of soccer. There's also an element of Carnell plays this style of soccer, so we needed to bring in some guys that could play. So I think it's a little bit of both.
Makes sense. Do you, Evan, I know you were talking about like kind of D mids, like, do we have the D mids to make this work? Missing Martinez, of course.
Right.
Do you feel like those holes have been filled now?
Well,
or what do you feel about that?
We had the guy that we brought in to kind of replace Martinez score a goal inside of 42 games or whatever it was, so that was helpful. I'm still a little worried about our depth in some ways, but it's funny. I was sitting here thinking, I'm like, it's not very often because the Union are used to saying goodbye to fan favorite players largely for monetary reasons. I don't remember us really ever snagging a guy that I think really got on with a city like Indiana Vasilev. And I know you were a little broken up when he left. Um, Obviously, he got the assist for us in the last game that we've seen at this point against New England late, where he laid it off for a second time, which looked weird for Lukic, who banged it. What are we getting in Indiana Vasilev? And is there more than just a player fits my style of play, I'm bringing him in kind of connection with him and Carnell? Is there some kind of culture, locker room leader? I mean, obviously, he's not going to overthrow, if that's the right word, like Alejandro Bedoya as the leader in the locker room. But is he also kind of a culture fit too, you think, with Carnell?
I think he's a player fit. I think he is a culture fit. He won't be a leader in the locker room ever, I don't think. But he is like a glue guy. He's fun to be around.
Strong
that kind of
statement,
thing.
but very fair. To just be like, no, that's not. And it's, there's in a way, it's nice knowing that guys kind of understand that, because if everyone wants to lead, you got a problem. But sorry, continue.
That's true. Yeah, no, I mean, but he understands what the coach wants. I think he understands what can happen when there's buy-in, which is something we should probably touch on quite a bit at some point. But he did buy into Carnell, and I think I said this to you, that he must think he is at his best in a pressing style. And I think it shows. You guys haven't been able to see it yet, but even his time with the national team, I thought pressing was the best thing he did for them in this last thing he just got, January camp time that he got. I think even the national team coach, why can't Pochettino, even loved that about him. And I think even in the training videos of him leading up to the Olympics, there was like, they were doing pressing exercises and he was incredible at it. And he was like, St. Louis press, baby, let's go. So he's proud of it and he's very good at it. It might be the thing he's best at, but you guys saw that he is good at laying off it, distributing the ball, making sure it keeps moving, being in the right place to help your team. You're going to see a lot that you like from him. He's a fun guy. Like, he's going to be a fan favorite on top of that, which is fun. And Carnell has a guy that's going to help, evangelize the rest of the Union into the system for sure. So, I think you guys have it spot on, and you're going to like him. And he is made for it. But is he a leader? I don't think so.
Well, I think it's
go back
right
back to the bad stuff.
Because what's interesting about the press, and I think that was kind of the one thing that everyone sort of consistently hit on too, is like, we're a young team. We have a bunch of academy kids. We're not going to play the most like technically beautiful, like, champagne Inter Miami Jordi Alba football or whatever you want to call it. What we have is a lot of kids with legs, and they can just run. And when you're forcing the opponent to make decisions for you, it doesn't really matter if you're the best team or not, because you just need to capitalize on mistakes. And I feel like Indy, in sort of like a new system or kind of in a new role coming off the bench and something, like, not having to be the 1,000-minute guy is good. And also for us in general, not necessarily needing like all these kids to play all those minutes, even though they very well could, would be helpful too. But I'm curious, you guys, obviously, we talked about it, didn't finish a whole lot last year. Has it changed? Is it changing? I know there's some injuries in the team too that aren't being terribly kind to you, but what's the general sort of scope in Olaf Melberg's St. Louis City?
Yeah, under Olaf, he's a famous center back, Swedish center back, played in Premier League and a few other top leagues. He's really good. And he is a guy that when he took over, we weren't sure what we were going to get, but defense is what we got. I mean, we are a conservative team that will bunker in 5 in the back if you bypass our press. So the press is an option, right? And that's something we will choose our moments. If we're not pressing, we're going to just go to a mid block and then bunker in once you get past the mid block. So it's tight, right? We're going to be hard to score on. And we didn't score any goals in the first 2 games. We did score against LA Galaxy, but I think we're all afraid to trust that based on what the Galaxy has looked like so far, to be fair. So, we'll see what happens in the next probably 4 or 5 games because we have a tough slate ahead of us. You guys, being one of the better teams too. So, we'll see what happens, but I think it's nice to be, we're playing the best defense St. Louis City's ever seen in their 2 years and a couple of games history. So that's nice. And it's kind of nice change of pace to like start the game conservative, start the season conservative, 2 clean sheets, a win, and then maybe improve the attack as the year goes on rather than, pants on fire. Do we have the legs to make it through to the playoffs and on? So it feels very much like we can make it to the playoffs and we could steal games just with our defense. But if we figure out the attack, we could become a very dangerous team. I think that's like the bright side, the hope that we have that could be crushed. But it's a good start, I think, for St. Louis fans. I think everybody's, has reason to be hopeful and are hopeful. So
yeah, that's interesting because I think that's our, like, looking at the Union, that's kind of my fear of like, all right, can we continue this? And as we get to the summer and Andre Blake does his normal stints with Jamaica and like all the rotation that can happen in the midst of the season, do we have the legs to keep it up? And like, I think Evan and I are probably both looking at the season and like, we didn't expect Frankie Westfield to be playing 90 minutes a game at the beginning of the season, and he's played well. And I'm like, well, that's the only position where we really have that, I think striker too, but I think that's the only position of right back with, Bizo and Nathan Harriel as well. That is like, that's the only position where we really have depth that we know about. I think like center back, the question would be Glavinovic is obviously on the roster, was a big signing, was a higher money signing, but hasn't played yet. And Makanya has played well. And so there's, not a reason to see him necessarily yet, and then Wagner, if Wagner goes down, I have no idea what happens at left back. And so I think there's these depth issues, Evan mentioned the depth issues, but I think there's those depth issues that I'm like, all right, we've started out fast, but this season is not a 10-game season. It's, it's a 34-game season with other competitions in there. And so are we going to be able to maintain it all the way through, and make a playoff run? And so it is one of those things that it is an interesting balance of how high press you can go, but also can you get the guys the rest that they need to continue it for 34 plus games.
I hope you can dig deep and use those kids' legs, right? But depth in the second season, there are a lot of things that kind of went wrong, but depth was the first problem. And we kind of joked like, okay, we had no depth. We couldn't give him reinforcements. He tried to use City 2 to kind of fill those holes, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And he went to a team like Philadelphia Union where it's kind of the same story, right? Although you do have like the depth of the academy. So I hope that can be a thing. I think even as a fan of USMNT, I want to see as many of your academy players on the first team as possible. So I hope they can spread the love. It's too early for us to say, are they going to dig deep into the academy or not? Are they going to try to save those legs? There was also this feeling, to be fair, in the first season, like we just kept winning and we never lost hardly. And so it was like, we can't stop until we lose. And, we just shot ourselves in the foot, literally. So that was a thing. So I don't think that's going to happen to you guys per se, but
well, the nice thing for us, and like really what I think kind of, if you look at it from a off-field, like organizational view of what went wrong for St. Louis, you were too good too quick. It's like the Vegas Knights in hockey problem, where it's you did the whole thing right away, and now there's kind of like this weird precedent of like that's just gonna be us, and that's really hard to do, especially if you don't start off, guns blazing, like last year, where it's like, all right, we have a dip or whatever. Let's get Carnell out of here. For the Union, it's like there's, I think, a bulk of our fan base vividly remembers the team being awful. So it helps when it's like, no, I still remember when we're like really bad and all of our playoff runs felt like house money. And the only thing that we were really upset about was like never winning the Open Cup, even though you've been to like 4 finals. Now there's like this weird, we're good enough to like, I don't know, threaten in the playoffs every year. But like last year was the first year that I felt like everyone was like very disappointed in the team, with us just like not really making the playoffs, even though we had expectations. So now we're kind of struggling to figure out like, okay, new guys in, the games are going really well, we're attacking, we have a lot of pressure on, we're winning by like a lot. Can we keep this up? And then like what happens when we make the playoffs? Is this just a flash in the pan kind of thing, or is it sustainable? And then with the academy kids, it's like, all right, you've inherited the best or second best, depending on who you talk to, and if they're in Frisco or if they're in Philadelphia, the best or second best academy in MLS. You're gonna use it. They're gonna want you to use it, because to be honest, I think not the way that Frankie's being used by Carnell this year. I think people were expecting Jim to use Frankie more down the stretch last year. And that was part of the problem too, where it's like, all right, you have Kevin Sullivan, who just signed for Manchester City for God knows why. Like, are you like, you got to use these kids because they're not gonna be here forever, and the goal is to turn them out. So, we'll see. But yeah, I think the real killer for you guys in St. Louis was that it was too successful too quick, in a way.
Agreed.
Which is weird to say, but
it is, and strangely, I maybe we can pivot to this, because the thing that happened was like the wheels fell off so fast, and there was no time given to Carnell, and that's still been like, if I could be a fly on the wall to hear why they decided to go ahead and fire him instead of give him 1 or 2 more years with, actually spending some money. And not have 3 or 4 of our starters injured throughout the season. It was weird to see him go so fast, but I will say, like, the thing to look out for are these 2 things. One was like people started bunkering on St. Louis, and there just was no answer outside of that. And that's what we saw kind of Hackworth try to fix, right? Try to still press, but find a way to attack. Well, then the defense was a mess, right? But it was fun to watch. I enjoyed the Hack tenure, as short as it was. And but Carnell, after that adjustment, there was no figuring out how to beat a team that's bunkered in. So that's one thing to look at. Will teams adjust against Philadelphia Union, and will Carnell have an answer to that? If he does, boy, I'm rooting for him. It'll be so interesting to see what that looks like. The other thing was, we kept losing fullbacks, high quality fullbacks. One was a Europa left back who just got 3 assists or 2 assists with Randers in I think it was Europa League yesterday. And maybe it was just a regular season game. Doesn't matter. Quality players, right? Coming in and leaving. John Nelson, who got MLS Cup with the Galaxy, started the final. These are quality players that seem to have like fallen out of his graces. You guys got Sam Adeniran last year. He was the biggest one we knew for sure fell out of his graces. The rest is just rumor. AZ Jackson went to Columbus. It's just so many players left, and it felt like the buy-in disappeared at some point. He lost it culturally, and they had to get rid of him, I think, because the wheels just completely fell off. I don't know how true that is. That's what it felt like, but it was weird that he didn't get more of a try. So that's just something to look for, is if players start disappearing and you're starting to lose games, that might be a key that something's going wrong. But you got a lot of young players, like young buy-in is a thing, right? So if you can keep everyone buying in and following the system, I think it'll continue to work. I'm excited to see if there's an adjustment period after the bunkering inevitably happens.
Yeah, it is interesting to me, and I think like one of the things that the union has had going for them, I guess, is like there were plenty of times in the last 10 years that people wanted Curtin gone, and there seemed to be all right, we're going to stick and see how it goes and continue to ride the train that Curtin has going, and see what happens toward the end of, and see what happens as the season progresses and all of that. So I'm wondering, like, my thing is like, even if Carnell starts dipping, or the performance starts dipping, or the results stop not happening, or the bunkering happen, any of that, if any of that happens against Carnell, it it doesn't feel like the union ownership, the union organization is uh one to move on quickly, I guess. Now the caveat I'll put on that is they haven't really had the opportunity to, I guess, other than Curtin, and you wonder if kind of the rebound uh relationship in some ways, like if there is like a shorter leash there. But I do hope that they stick with it, like even if the results start dipping at some point in time, you got to just kind of let it ride and see what happens. It feels like most teams who are successful um, don't fire coaches at their first mishap or
Yeah.
their first run of struggles. And so it's like, if you're going to continue to be successful in MLS, and I feel like that's what made Curtin successful, is at the first sign of trouble back in 2015, 2016, they didn't go, okay, well, you've been here for 3 years and we haven't got MLS Cup yet. We got to move on. And it was like, no, we stuck with it. We gave him time to develop and figure out his coaching style and adjust to MLS. And obviously that brought on a lot of success. Now, I do think this year it was time to move on, but it is interesting. You hope that they don't move on quickly.
Agree. And I said some, things to worry about, but I also want to say that, like, I think one of the grossest losses USA has had against Canada, probably it's got to be the grossest loss, was that last game. And it wasn't just Jesse Marsh there. It was Bradley Carnell was an assistant. And, it's undeniable what he's done with the Union, what he did with St. Louis in the first year. He's a romantic. I think he's well-spoken. I think he's got drive. He's competitive. You can see that if you start challenging him in the press room, he gets this look about him like, you're not taking me down, or you're not going to trick me, or you're not going to get me to say something that I don't mean, or, a gotcha statement. So I've really enjoyed the time that we did get with Bradley, and I do think he's a quality coach. So again, I'm with you, Justin. I hope he gets lots and lots of chances. I want to see him get a full chance to succeed, because I was shocked that it ended so quickly in St. Louis.
Yeah. Well, any other thoughts, guys, on this game? I feel like we covered a lot of ground over the course of 30 minutes or so, and I want to give people the who are, I don't know, on the way to the game, listening to this or whatever, I want to make sure they can wrap it up. But any other thoughts, predictions, things you're watching this weekend?
Speaking of romantics, I think all three of us are that in a lot of ways.
Yes.
So I will ask Phill, is there any potential danger on either side of the narrative points factoring into the game with, the cast out coach returning, or that is there some weird kind of like curse of the ex team of John Hackworth? Is this the Hackworth derby? What's happening?
Man, yeah.
What are the narrative points? I mean, he's not involved with either team anymore, so he can present like a weird trophy or like a one of his son's jerseys or something.
No, he's still here.
Wins. Oh, is he still
like
around?
he's like an athletic director. He's in charge of coaching, but he also just has a lot. He informs Lutz. He's kind of like the American portion of our sporting director in a way, but with a lot more responsibility. So yeah, Hack's still here.
Hack might be in the building. That's exciting. Should we be on the lookout for like a John Hackworth revenge game or something?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm kind of curious. I assume it'll be all love and hugs on the field, right? Like, I don't know if Luke will go down there, but I'm sure Hack and Bradley will enjoy seeing each other.
It'll be the Sam. Neither of us like Sam dinner and Derby.
Yeah, I think they'll be able to
Both
find some
teams are
common
pretty
ground
quick to
there.
move
Yeah.
on from that. Yeah,
Though he's killing it in
yeah,
Austria,
being my
honestly. He's
enemy or
doing really
whatever.
well. So,
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, more power to him.
There you go.
Do we have any like score predictions for this, or is it like too far out to even try to figure out how that's gonna look?
Well, I just want to say one thing, and then I kind of want to ask like your rebuttal if you have one, because we've talked about what will happen if someone bunkers against Philly, and like St. Louis, I think is going to be the first team that's going to be close to that to some degree. And you know, you talk about the Hackworth Derby, you're like, well, Hackworth knows what works, right, against Carnell. They work together quite a bit. And there's a world where St. Louis says, screw the press. We're going to sit back and dare you to score on us. That's what Sporting Kansas City did against us in the playoffs. And I think it would work. It, I'd almost, you know, I would be waiting for, if it worked in the 80th minute or so, I'd be looking for a shot of Carnell to see like how angry he is that it's working. But you want to, you know, I'm curious if that happens. And I'm curious too, you know, when you guys, what do you think Union will do in that situation or even outside of that situation? Maybe they can impose their style on a new, you know, a team that's new to the Olaf Melberg tactical style.
Yeah, I think I mean my initial thought on that would be I think when you're starting Baribo and Ure up top, you're like that's setting yourself up for, you know, a end-to-end high press type game. I think my hope would be that Damiani brings a little bit of a different, you know, style in a lot of ways, that he seems to be a little bit better with the ball at his feet and seems to be a little bit better in tight spaces and all of that kind of stuff, where I don't know, you know, what we lost with Carranza was somebody who's really good at holding the ball up and really good at shielding the ball and drawing fouls and all that kind of stuff. And so I think I'm hoping that Damiani is kind of the person that fills that gap a little bit. And then I think we have enough people. I think we have enough good passers of the ball, enough good set piece takers, Wagner being the primary one. But I think we have enough good, um, you know, pieces that I think we can play a different style. You know, I think if we get bunkered, we'll still be able to put a lot of balls in the box, put a lot of balls in dangerous areas, and all that kind of stuff. I don't know that that's the style we want to play. But I think if you're going to give us the first 70 yards on the field and make us earn the last 30, I think we can. I just don't know. You know, we haven't seen it under this coach being able to do it, and I don't know that Baribo and Ure are set up to do that.
Evan, actually, you said this in DMs. You said that Gazdag has to kind of become that guy, and so far he has been. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the first I've heard about Damiani as well, so I'm kind of curious what you think.
yeah. I'll touch on Damiani, I guess, first, and then I have like a quick but maybe salient point, because Justin said all like the positive things that can happen. Where I think like if you're going to give us that much space, we should be able to take it.
Nice.
Damiani, when he came in, said that he wants to be that big like target forward, and if teams are going to bunker against us, he's probably going to get a chance to do that. Because even that little pivot from kind of like a, you know, high press to play a long ball and have him knock it down and lay it off to someone, like that's still a very much part of the gegenpress system.
Yeah.
So I mean, they brought him in. He goes, I want to do this. I'm sure when we were talking to him, we went, you're going to want to do this, right? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. So now it's, okay, do it. Which should be how all jobs work, I suppose. What I will say, and it's followed him his whole career, but most recently, and the one that most people will get, hopefully, because we don't all just watch MLS. I know, I'm sorry. Whenever Pep Guardiola and Mikel Arteta are playing each other, in the days leading up to the game, everyone makes these beautiful overtures and gets very romantic about the, you know, the teacher and the student, all that fun stuff. Then you watch the game and it just turns into no one wants to make a mistake, so nothing of consequence happens for about 80 minutes. And then everyone tries to get their stuff in for the last 10. And I think at worst, having this much organizational familiarity and overlap, that could very well be what this turns into. Which I'm
I could see
sure
it.
both Bradley Carnell, Olaf Melberg, and John Hackworth would be flattered to be compared to Pep Guardiola and Mikel Arteta.
Oh,
So
you
let
mean
me
they'd
not,
be flattered? They'd be flattered at 80 minutes of trash soccer and 10 minutes of doing their best. Is that what you're saying?
absolutely. Because I watched so many 80 minutes of trash John Hackworth soccer. That's another one.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And honestly,
Over
Evan, there's a chance you just nailed it for real.
over many leagues, Phil. I've watched trash John Hackworth USL soccer, and there is nothing better than actually watching what. There it is. I figured it out. This is how we go home. This could very well turn into Louisville City and Pittsburgh Riverhounds playing each other. And that would be great
Nailed
for
it.
3 people, and we're all here, and nobody else.
So
Because
much. Hey,
we could turn
Akil
on that
Watts will be
game.
there.
We could turn off the game after 5 minutes. Go. We know exactly how this is going to go, and enjoy our Saturday or Sunday. It'd be wonderful.
Completely agree. Well said.
Yeah, for sure. I'm right there with all
Anyway.
of that being said. I don't need to watch another Pittsburgh Riverhounds
No.
versus Louisville City game.
No.
That is 2 a year is good for me, and I'm good.
Yeah, we've
I'm
had
good
our
being
we've had
done
our
there.
fill. Thank you.
Heyo.
Speaking of, you should follow our MLS podcasts. Phil, where do people go and find Flyover Footy?
Yeah. At Flyover Footy
There
on
it is.
X is
God,
what we
love
say
that.
now, not Twitter.
Easy
Yeah.
plugs. Yeah, whatever.
And
On those things. What do you say at the top of the radio show? It's like wherever you find your podcasts, just it's there.
there you go, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I have to say the phrase, and I'm Phill Grooms on Twitter, 2 L's, 2 O's.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
That's what I used to say back in the day.
Good Lord.
Love it. Love it. The USL show throwbacks are real.
Yeah, don't go find those videos. I hope Kaler scrubbed them, actually. I hope none of it exists anymore. I know it does, but...
All right. Well, we'll end there for tonight, but enjoy the game this weekend, and we'll see what happens between Philly and St. Louis. Phil, thanks for joining us and entertaining our need to have you on tonight.
Thanks, guys. I really enjoyed it. Good to see you.
All right. Well, we'll see you, and we'll have more Union content very, very soon.